Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Garthwait Leadership Summit. My name is Andy Hughes, and I'm the director for the Garthwait Leadership Center. And it's my absolute pleasure to welcome you not only to Family Weekend here at the college, but also to the summit. We have a fantastic event for you this afternoon, and I hope that you've brought some great questions and are excited to hear from our panelists today. I really have one job this afternoon, and that's to introduce our moderator, and his name is Neil Bryant. He's the Vice President of Sales Development at Carestream Incorporated. But we know him as an 82 alum of Gettysburg. He's currently on the GLC Advisory Council and very active volunteer of our organization and here at Gettysburg. Would you please join me in giving Neil a warm welcome.
Thanks so much, Andy. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. Delightful to have you all here. This morning, I turned to Jen, who's also an alum. I said, well, the sun is out, and there's a little bit of a snap in the fall air. I get to go to Gettysburg, and I'm going to hear from 4 people who are experts in the field of leadership. What a great day I had planned for me, and I'm so happy you could join me here. I will also tell you, those of you in my age bracket, I'm adjusting to these new, they call them progressives, right? But what happened, once in a while I feel like I'm on a boat. So your job is, if during the next hour you see me start to sway a little bit, I want all of you to go the way that I do. So I feel like I'm okay, I'm on solid ground. Welcome, welcome, welcome. As Andy said, it's one of the highlights of the year for us and for the center, mostly because of the individuals who are assembled here. Very special welcome to those of you visiting campus today. We know this is a special weekend for you and your loved ones. We appreciate you spending time here, but mostly thank you to the students who are here, because this is all done for you. We've got a very, very simple format, very simple. We will talk a little bit about these individuals through 2 different lenses. They will share with you their own personal leadership journeys. What's it been like? And then they'll talk specifically about one of the competencies that we embrace here at the Garthwait Leadership Center. One of the messages we try and get through to students is we are committed to demystifying this thing called leadership. Right? It's almost like most of the work in leadership in the 70s and 80s. Leadership took on this mystical quality that some people were sprinkled with some magic pixie dust and they became leaders. Or leaders are just the people that we see on the evening news or on the front page of the newspaper or CEOs of corporations. Of course, we know that's not true now. And most of the research that's come out in the last couple of decades makes it very clear that leadership is both an art and a science. And it can be learned, it can be developed, and it can be grown. So we are committed here to make sure that students who have an interest in such a thing are able to develop those skills. And we'll talk a little bit about that through the day. So if you think about it in a very simple context, leadership really is, from a common definition, the ability to use available resources to create positive change. The ability to use available resources to create positive change. Simple sentence, complex ideas, but we'll dig into that. So, here's what we have planned for today. That is not what we have planned for today. We have that planned for later today. Here are objectives for the next 60 minutes. One, I don't understand all the words in that first sentence because Andy wrote it. What it really means is we need to be clear that leadership exists across all fields and across all professions. Leadership is not limited to certain roles and certain individuals. And you'll see that by the representation of our panel. There are key competencies that the research suggests underscore all great leaders. We will talk about those competencies specifically and hear from our experts how they've played a role in their own leadership journeys. But then the part that helps me to stand really, really tall is we're hearing from our very own. 3 of these 4 individuals up here have walked these halls, lived these dorms, ate at Servo, right? They have been just as we have. For you current students, there's no reason why there isn't some future point in time where you can be occupying one of these seats. And for the first time in the summit, we're privileged to have a parent of a student represented. So we think that also gives us a very interesting aspect of leadership. That's our objective. Very quickly, we're not going to take time going through bios that you should have in your handouts, detailed bios on all of our individuals. But we are blessed to have today Flora Darpino, who's Judge Advocate General of the United States Army and almost a classmate of mine. Nick Johnson's here from the class of 90. Nick is Senior Vice President, NBC Sports Digital Media. Dion Liverpool from the class of 93, representing the youth in the room. I can say that, right, Dion?
Sure.
Okay. An entrepreneur in the music business. Interesting to hear what he has to say. And Beth Young, parent class 16, who is the president of Princeton Health System. So what you can see to one of our first objectives is we have represented in front of you military service, law, communications, media, and corporate America, music and entertainment business, entrepreneurship, and the health industry. So again, hopefully what you're seeing is leadership is not limited to those who are on TV. Now, while our panelists are getting settled in, I do want to give you a very brief introduction to what the Garthwait Leadership Center is, which will give context to our conversation today. Founded in 2010, a gift from an alumnus who happens to be a classmate of mine from the great class of 1982. He made a gift to found the center. He's an individual who's committed to what Andy is doing here in developing leadership skills among our young men and women at the college. Those of you who are out in the workforce, I'm sure you're well aware that even with talented individuals such as Gettysburg students, these young men and women are coming out with great knowledge in what I call vertical areas, so subject matter expertise, etc. What the workplace needs a lot more of are people who can get things done. And the skill sets to get things done, to accomplish things, is a different skill set. It's more of a longitudinal or a lateral type of learning. And that's what the Garthwait Leadership Center teaches. This will be an eyesore for some of you in the back, but it's the one slide to let you know that what we're doing isn't hocus pocus. Everything that's taught through the Leadership Center is built on a foundation. We start at a base level of leadership principles that then are embraced through what we call foundational values and evidenced by the 5 core competencies. And we'll talk about that later. Then what we do is take each of these competencies and break them into specific skills, specific development activities, so the students can develop their proficiency in these competencies. Not science in the development area, but all of what we're doing here is supported by leadership research. So this is the way the GLC operates. We have a core set of programs. You can get more information about these on the website. Most of them, current students, need to apply. They need to demonstrate a level of commitment that they want to step up and be part of this program. But our objective is to come in contact with any student who has any desire to develop leadership skills. Some of them are retreat type events once a year. Others are recurring events throughout the year. What I happen to be pretty fond of is these are all run through a group of individuals called leadership mentors. These are current students on campus who they themselves have invested in their own development as leaders. Then they act as consultants for the rest of the community. They actually go out and teach their fellow students about leadership skills. And this is off script, but I know there are LMs in the room here today, and I'd like them to stand up and be recognized. Where are you all? Come on, come on, come on, come on. In the past few years, this is the last slide to give you some background, but I think it's significant, particularly for some of you parents, to know. We've touched more than 1,200 students in their leadership development in just a few short years. And as a quick aside, the commencement speaker this past year was a gentleman named David Gergen here at Gettysburg. And if you don't know David, he was a presidential advisor through 4 administrations. And a pretty impressive gentleman, if I do say so. By happenstance, he also happens to be the director of the Leadership Development Center at Harvard. And we had an opportunity to have a conversation the evening he was here, and he was really driving at me about how do you get so much student participation? He was trying to find out from us, what do you do to generate this kind of engagement? Well, of course, being ultra competitive, I didn't tell him a thing. But it was impressive to have someone of that stature trying to figure out how are you guys doing what you're doing. So he might be Harvard, but we are Gettysburg. So without further ado, let's do this. Let's move right into our panelists. The first question we put to each of them was to please tell us about your own personal leadership journey. What's it been like? What have you learned along the way that might have value for others? And give us a little bit of insight into your leadership journey. And with that, let's move right into it. And if I could, Flora, could you please kick us off and tell us about the Darpino story?
Okay, so first, as you just heard, I am a Gettysburg graduate. I am an accidental soldier. My college sweetheart was an ROTC graduate here from Gettysburg. We met our junior year. He joined the Army after he graduated. We both ended up going to law school, 2 separate law schools. But my 3rd year in law school, one of my professors said, "What are you going to do, young lady? You take a bar exam everywhere you go? Why don't you just join the Army?" And after the initial shock of thinking, really? The Army? I did some research and decided it really fit who I was and what I wanted to do. And if worse came to worse, I was only signing a 3-year contract. If I could get through 3 years of law school, I figured I could get through 3 years of the Army. I'm happy to say that the marriage has lasted all 26 plus years of my career, as has obviously my decision to become a soldier. And along the way, I've kind of learned a few things about leadership. But really, the key thing I learned, I believe, is that leadership is about growing the people in your organization. It is never about you. Leadership is always about growing the people in your organization. It is just never about you. And if you lose sight of that, I think then you lose sight of what it means to be a leader. Now, as I said, the Army kind of fits that style of leadership that I believe in. We are a values-based organization. We are built on the team concept by nature because we're a ground force. We train our individuals so that they can pick up if one of us falls and continue to go on, so it's definitely team-based. And when you start out in the military as a young officer, you start out kind of like a team captain when you're a leader. And as you move up through the ranks, you more become a coach. But your responsibility always as a leader, as I said, is to make the people in your organization better. And so you have to have an ability not only to assess yourself, but to assess the people you work with. And take somebody who is a B performer and work with them and make them an A. Take someone who's a C performer, work them and make them a B, and so on. But you also have to have the ability to recognize the difference between a D and an A. And at some point in time say, you're cut from the team, just like a team captain or a coach would be. Because the Army is a meritocracy. 2 months ago, I received a promotion to 3-star general. When I received my promotion, my best friend had to retire because they were not promoted. It is a meritocracy. And so the whole time as a member, as you grow, I learned a few things being that team captain and that coach. And I think the parents out there who are leaders in their communities, who are in industry, will understand what I'm about to speak to. And I just kind of walked you through it just a little bit to demystify, as you said, kind of what it means to be a leader. And this happened when I was a team captain and a young officer, all the way up to now where you could say I'm a coach, of 10,000 lawyers worldwide, active guard, reserve, in an Army that's over 1 million people, providing that advice. So those things that I learned are most important, and I think parents again, that by the time a problem comes to you, there is no clear answer. If there was a clear answer to the problem, it wouldn't come to the team captain or it wouldn't come to the coach. All the answers that are available to you for that problem are usually either undesirable or very, very difficult to make. It's by nature very hard. And by the time it gets to you as the coach or the team captain, you usually have very, very little time to make that decision, be it difficult and undesirable, with that very, very difficult and unique problem. And by nature, you usually don't have all the information that you need to make that decision. And so you have a tough problem with probably undesirable decisions at hand. You have little time to make it, and you don't have all the information. But you've got to make it. You have no choice. And that's where sometimes moral courage comes in, but I would argue that the things you can influence in those 4 factors that are pretty common once you get in positions of leadership are time and information. And so I personally have done a lot of self-thought over the years in my failings and in my successes. You know, after large events, I'll often take a walk, counsel myself, evaluate myself, determine what I could or couldn't do better. And I came up with some things that I think make a difference when it comes to those particular factors, time and information. And they're things that make most people very, very uncomfortable. Because I think to close the gap between time and information, I have to tip my hand. I have to be vulnerable. I have to let the people who I am trying to grow in my organization see how I think and how I make my decisions. Even though it may at times make me look like I am lost and confused, because sometimes you are. You're a human being that is in a position, and so sometimes you are. But you have to be willing to do that. And the strategy I use to do that is that first, I sit them down when I join any new organization. You have to remember in the Army, you move every 2 years. You get a new job every 2 years when you're an officer. The whole idea is for you to learn and grow and do different things so that when we drop you on a battlefield somewhere and you have no communication, you can act across a broad spectrum of problems. And so getting comfortable is not something that military officers really do. Every 2 years you get a new team that you have to grow and develop. So the first thing I do is an in-brief, and I tell them about myself. And I say things like, you know, I'm very sarcastic. Doesn't mean I don't like you. I try not to do it, but I have a quick wit that is very sarcastic. If you bring me something for a decision, I'll make a decision right away. So if you just want to talk about it, tell me that. I'm a linear thinker. You might not be a linear thinker, I get that. But when you're talking to me, I'm thinking in outline form. So if you want to just brainstorm, tell me we're brainstorming. So I don't go into decision mode and start doing my pros and cons in outline form. And I tell my team that. When we're talking about something, I ask questions. So I'm curious, or because I need more information. But I don't just ask the question, I tell them why I'm asking the question. So it's not like I gotcha. I'm asking you that question because this is the information I seek and why I need that information. So the next time they come in, they start to say to themselves, what are the things she's going to want? What information? When I make a decision, I typically explain why I decided that way, so that they understand my thought process. Again, so they bring me the information they need, or worse, if they can't get me, they know how I think, and they can make that decision on their own, and they won't be afraid. I also think out loud when we're brainstorming. which again can make you look pretty silly because you're, working through a problem and what you say at that moment is not thought out and it may not make as much sense. But I believe by being vulnerable and showing folks how I think, I close that gap of time and information. They come to me sooner and they bring me the information I need to make that decision. I also work hard to make sure that they don't hold back. And I know you look at the uniform and you think that can be probably intimidating to junior officers because we are a hierarchy and we are a meritocracy. And so I have to work as a leader, regardless of my rank, to make sure that I let them know that they can come and talk to me about issues, that they don't have to wait. We can brainstorm, we can have a discussion. I would rather do that and give them what we call an azimuth check, a course correction. Come in and talk about it, and then I'll send you back out. Come get guidance, so that it's not a crisis when you finally come to me. But when we're having those sessions, I also have to do something which is hard for me, which is sort of hold back on the emotion. Because there's many times where you have to keep a straight face as a leader. Somebody says something and you think to yourself, well, that's not a very good idea. But if you show that on your face, that person the next time might not brainstorm and throw it out for you. And so you need to make sure that you somewhat, I call keeping the straight face. Never dismiss their ideas. Never criticize them. You want them to always engage you as a leader. And then when folks make those decisions below you that you disagree with, unless they're unethical, immoral, illegal, try to endorse them. It may not have been the decision you would make, and I know it's different in industry where the dollar is the bottom line, but if you're able to endorse that decision, then you endorse that decision. But then you tell them, well, I wouldn't have done it that way. This is probably what I would have done, and this is why. And so you help them grow. You help them grow in their decision making. And what I find then is that they come into my office and they will say, ma'am, I screwed up. My response, how do we fix it? And then after a while, they come in my office and they'll say, hopefully not the same person, by the way, ma'am, I screwed up, and here's how I think we need to fix it. Because they start doing that on their own as part of the organization. Now, I don't want to give you the idea that I'm like a pushover. You probably could guess you don't get to be a 3-star general in the Army by being a pushover. When I said you take someone who's a B and you make them an A, it's by having standards and enforcing those standards. It's by leading your example and making sure that they follow the rules. But that doesn't mean you have to be authoritarian. It doesn't mean you have to be a dictator. You can have a very collaborative organization, and you can be a coach and still enforce standards. A coach does not mean that you're somebody and everybody's friend. It means you're working every day to make sure your team and every player on your team is going to their full potential so that they accomplish the mission, whatever that mission may be. And so that's what I've kind of learned in my personal journey.
Terrific. Thanks very much. So there's a lot to chew on in there. For you note takers out there, what Flora is talking about in this part of leadership is developing those who are associated with you. There's a second dimension to that, is that great leaders develop other leaders, and we refer to that as level 5 leadership. There's plenty of research on that topic. Nick, could you tell us about the Johnson journey?
Yeah, sure. What I can tell you is I'm definitely intimidated by the uniform.
I wasn't about to cut her off.
No, I'm very thankful she's got a good poker face, because I'm glad she doesn't wear her emotions on her sleeves, because I'm very nervous up here. I've taken a slightly different approach here. I spent a lot of time with students over the last 5 years, and so I really am talking about my leadership journey almost literally from the beginning in terms of how I felt coming out of school to how I got here, and just sort of what drove that. Quick side note, also married a Gettysburg girl. Unfortunately, I was on the 5-year plan, she was on the 4-year plan. That kind of messed things up a little bit, but we've been together 20 years, married 20 years, so that's a good story too. But my story is, I grew up, my family moved a lot internationally, and I came to the States for boarding school, came to college, and I think sort of a residual from that is I sort of was a reactive child. I didn't really have a game plan. I just sort of went with stuff as it kind of flowed. And as I approached graduation, I remember my father looking at me, and my father's a pretty successful guy, and he's like, "Why do you look so, glum? You just graduated." I was like, "I'm glum because I just graduated. I really don't know what I want to do next." And I had a vague notion I wanted to get into advertising, and so I kind of got lucky and lucked into it. But what happened to me early on is my career kind of owned me. I didn't really own my career, and I got into this sort of cycle of chasing jobs to get the next job without really a game plan. And for me, in terms of how I pivoted and made a move, is essentially I had a career epiphany. And once I realized what it was I wanted to do, and once I found passion for something, that changed everything. It reprioritized everything in my life. It refocused everything in my life. And many of the things that were just so well articulated by Flora sort of came along with that, but driven first by passion. And so my story basically is, after a couple of years in advertising, again, sort of chasing a job, chasing a paycheck, I decided I wanted to basically follow my father's footsteps a little bit, and I moved to Japan, worked for an advertising agency for 4 years. And while that in and of itself doesn't have anything to do with my path, what happened was, living in Japan in the early 90s, for a guy that loved sports, loved entertainment, was basically a cultural vacuum. There was nothing happening. We had the Stars and Stripes newspaper, which was not all that scintillating, and CNN International, which was great if you cared about European soccer, maybe. My second year, though, Netscape launched, and all of a sudden I had real-time access to news and information from the States, and to me that just grabbed my gut, and I thought to myself, this is something that's going to change everything. And literally from that moment forward, it really informed everything I did. It instilled in me a hunger to succeed and a hunger to be ahead. It instilled in me the desire to build businesses and build teams. To the point earlier, it instilled to me, in order to be successful, I knew that I had to be very, very self-aware. And self-awareness has always been a part of sort of my leadership journey, and making sure that I knew what I was good at and what I wasn't good at, making sure I surrounded myself with really strong people. And I always, from that moment on, have sort of seeked the white space and sort of embraced the uncertainty and the explosion that was happening in digital media. And that really drove me. To me, that chasing of your epiphany, and this is really directed to students, is so critical to what you do, because the world is changing very, very quickly, more quickly than it ever has before. And for me, the conversations I have with students a lot of the time is, as uncomfortable as it is to look forward, because there is a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of opportunity that's being created there. And so I really encourage my team to take risks, to iterate quickly. We are in the business of making money, and I'll get into it a little bit in the next part about vision and strategy, but making sure that we're propping up the team with creative thinkers, with people that are strong in finance, that are strong in strategy, areas that I'm not really good at, encouraging these people to take risks, encouraging them to grow, letting them be vocal about the problems that they encounter in the job. Being a critical evaluator of talent is obviously hugely important, because in order to be successful, you've got to be constantly reevaluating your talent. But for me, really, the key message that sits in my gut every day when I talk to people and when I think about why I'm so thankful for my career is really doubling down when you have that epiphany and knowing that this is something that you can be passionate about. I think passion is so important in everything that we do, especially in your career, and I think it's very easy to go down a path and sort of not recognize that you're being complacent, and being self-aware about your job satisfaction, your emotional satisfaction, your intellectual satisfaction is very, very important. And so again, I took a very different tact, but that's me. I just want to see if I missed anything here. You know, again, for me, finding a job and finding the white space was a huge thing for me. And at the end of the day, it let me sort of find a career trajectory and leadership trajectory that I probably never would have thought that I could have. I certainly know that my father was scared to death about what I was going to be when I was 23, so he's thankful for that every day.
Thanks very much. So I imagine if you're sitting there saying, well, I came here to learn about leadership, and you just listened to a gentleman who's obviously at the forefront of his field, and what he talked about were really soft skills, the people that you would label these things as soft. He talked about things like passion, authenticity, epiphany is the word he used several times. And we know that leadership comes from genuineness, right? I just made up that word, but that really is where it is. And it's very difficult to encourage others to want to follow you if you yourself are not going where you intend to go. So I think there's some great words inside what might sound soft. Those really are the keys to great leadership. Let's now go to the Dion story, a slightly different world. Right?
How you doing? My name is Dion Liverpool. I graduated from Gettysburg 1 score ago, which is 20 years for the history buffs in the room. First of all, thanks for having me here. I'm really excited to be amongst leaders and future leaders of the world at Gettysburg. I'll start with a short story about my time at Gettysburg. I was a freshman walking across campus with a good friend of mine. His name was Troy Datcher. He's class of 90. And it had snowed at Gettysburg, and there were footprints all across the campus. Troy was a seasoned intern. He had an internship with P&G throughout his college career and also ended up working for them after. He chose to walk in the snow in the footprints that were already marked. I myself, being a freshman, a skinny kid with a flat top, didn't know what I was doing. At Gettysburg, we walked into the Intercultural Resource Center, and I chose to step or make my steps in the snow, in the unbroken snow. And that really stuck with me over the years because I realized that I wasn't afraid to go in the darkness or walk in a place where I wasn't familiar with, and I was excited about it. And I think that ignited the passion in me to be a leader. Through college, I tried all the activities that were available to me, from the Black Student Union to Student Senate, soccer. I started a mobile DJ company with my roommates, and I also was one of the founding members of possibly now defunct boxing club. Just a side note, I think it was sophomore year or junior year, we had an invitation lit at Gettysburg at the big gym, and we had school boxers from the Citadel and all these big schools, and I, in front of the whole school, actually got knocked out in the first round. But that goes to show, as a leader, you get knocked down, you get back up. Very interesting, but yeah, for me, Nick talked about it, passion has been really, really important to my journey as a musician, as a manager, and as an entrepreneur. Once I graduated from college, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I had no idea. But I wasn't scared at the same time. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew what my passion was, music and entertainment. So I applied to the JET program and taught Japanese in Japan for 3 years. And that gave me a time to feel out what I was doing in my career and also learn to speak the Japanese language as well as be around a culture that had always fascinated me. After that, I came back to the States and I worked for Price Waterhouse for a year doing research. I'm fluent in Spanish, Portuguese, and Japanese. At the time, I was doing Spanish interpretations for one of the studies they were doing. And in the meantime, I moved to Atlanta. My mom had moved here during the Olympics. I moved to Atlanta, and I met one of my clients who's a member of, at the time they were broken up, but it's a group called A Tribe Called Quest. And I became a DJ for him, and then his manager, and then from there, a manager of his group, a co-manager of his group. Now, Tribe Called Quest has an interesting history. They broke up in 1997, but they're still highly sought after to perform all over the world. But imagine dealing with full-grown adults that have different personalities, 3 members, and trying to sell them or pitch them on a vision for what I think their career should be. It's trying at times, and at the same time, when they see it and they go with me on it, it's very exciting. I don't have a 9-to-5 job. Actually, graduated from Gettysburg, I've never had a 9-to-5 job. I've always had my office wherever I open my laptop, which was kind of cool. When the recession hit, it never really was a recession to me because I've always kind of had to, like, you know, manage my money right and be mindful that I didn't know when the next check was coming in. So that to me drove me to achieve what I've done in my career based purely off of passion. Passion is a word I use almost every day in my life, that I'm driven by my experiences, and I'm always excited about things I do, no matter how big or small the project is. And I'm always excited, as I was when I graduated from Gettysburg, to do the things I do. And I mean, I think Gettysburg is a great proving ground, or a great place to try, you know, your abilities in leadership, because you're not playing around with a $10 or $20 million budget. You can fail here, and it can still, you get knocked out in boxing and still get up, and you know the risk is lower. So leadership, you know, I didn't think I was a leader until Andrew approached me about this summit. I had to really sit back and think, like, what does leadership mean, and who am I as a leader? And so it caused me to sit down and really think about the things I've done in my career and reflect, and then say, hey, realize that leadership comes in different formats. When I first got the flyer he sent, you know, there were 3 pictures. One was of a highly decorated general. Then there was Nick, a highly successful television exec, and then there was me in a leather jacket, a scarf, and some headphones on. But I guess it just goes to show that we all took different paths in the snow, and we all got here. So thank you.
Something I want to follow up on, listening to Flora and Nick, and now you've all touched on this element of the unknown, right? And the way Flora described it is, by the time a decision comes to her, well, all the exercisable options have already been explored, right? So now, okay, now what do I do? And we talk about, Nick was talking about this white space, and because you go through your adventure of, well, recession, I'm always like this, right? Can you talk a little bit about what are some of the skills and tactics, and how do you carry others and carry yourself through the unknowns, the great scary situations where I don't know where this is going?
Right.
How do you deal with that?
I think, at least with one of the groups I manage, this a tribe called Quest, they're very different, and they're all motivated by different things, each member. One might be motivated by money, the other might be motivated by the art of it, and the other one may not care, and this could all interchange at any different time. I think growing up the way I did, my father, similar to Nick's experience, my father worked with an oil company, so every 2-3 years from the time I was born, we would move to a different country. So I've lived in Brazil, Guatemala, I'm born in Canada, lived in Spain, Holland, England, and also Abu Dhabi. So I was always dropped into scenarios where I didn't know the language, or I didn't know who was who, maybe mid-semester, and you're kind of lost as a kid. And as exciting as it was to travel, it was also very difficult to adapt and adjust and make friends. And by the time you make your friends, you up and you're rooting, you're going somewhere else now. So I found, as a kid, I naturally developed the ability to assess who was in the crowd, who did what did we have in common, how could I, work with them or hang out with them or play with them. And as we moved from country to country, that became so much faster. I would do it so much faster.
So it's this ability to understand those who you're with,
Absolutely.
sign their core motivation, and how do I use collaboration here to get them all moving
Exactly.
to one place?
Exactly. And sometimes it's language, sometimes it's both liking sports or culture, and you just have to really pinpoint and identify. And sometimes you're wrong in how you assess it, and you can always correct it. But I found that even growing up, it was really hard to move around. But then I am thankful because now as an adult, I'm able to utilize those skills I've been using for the past 30-odd years. And it's made my passage and my movement, through life a lot smoother.
Terrific. Beth, I know that healthcare expenditures in the U.S. we're getting close to 19% of GDP. We're not expecting you to solve that today, of course, right? But knowing that that's the world that you play in, could you give us a little bit of that story?
Sure. Actually, I'm very thankful that cleanup here and come in as the fourth presenter or talker. And I think it's fascinating. I just want to start with that we all have something in common where we moved around early in life. I was saying earlier to General Darpino that before I was in 4th grade, I had moved 10 times. And so you are dropped into the situation, you have to make an assessment, and it's just like each of us have set up here. So I think that out of that comes the importance of communication and the importance of learning the skills of other people, learning what other people are good at, and then assessing that and using that with your leadership role. And just, you know, again, my story or where I came from, I knew I wanted to be a nutrition consultant. For some reason, at 17 years old, I figured this out. So my dad, we lived in Virginia. I am not a Gettysburg grad, but we lived in Virginia. He said you can go to any Virginia state school that you would like to, and they had one, Virginia Tech, that had nutrition. So I applied to one school. I did not go there before I went for orientation and ended up there and, you know, majored in nutrition. Met my husband there, which is similar again. We're still married. We've been married 30 years. And then went on to get married, moved to New Jersey, go to Rutgers, while I was working at the company that I now own. So I started right after we were married in 1984 at a company called Health Enhancement Systems, which came out of the J&J Live for Life program. It was an early corporate wellness program. The fellow that I worked for, who started the J&J program, was a chemist, and he was had a PhD in chemistry, wanted to go into sales and marketing, decided that they told him that nobody could become go over from chemistry to sales, which he decided he was going to do. And then he decided that health promotion and wellness was the area that he wanted to work on for J&J because they were starting this new program. So he took his sales ability. He was a salesman for J&J for a long time. When they started this program, he decided that health promotion and wellness was a sales idea, that you had to sell people on the concept of health, which we're still working on today. We're still working on selling that concept of health. So anyway, that was the germination of the company that I started out in. I came there in 1984. He started the company in 1991. And I was working there while I was getting my master's degree. Went into sales for him, sold corporate wellness to companies across the United States from 1987 to 1993. Got my master's degree, got my RD, and then in 93 he decided to retire and said, if you want to keep going with this, here you go. Now you have a company. The next year I had my son, 1994. Then I had a company and a baby. And I had been married quite a long time. My mom said, you know, you don't know if you're having any more kids. You want to hang on to that company so you'll have something when you are then, you know, when he's grown up. Hold on to that. So I did. And as the company, sort of as I grew as a mom and owner of a company, I sort of tailored that company to what I needed it to look like so that I could do what I needed to do. And nutrition, as I always knew, was what I was most interested in. So in the last 20 years, that has taken off in, you know, sort of as the health promotion is still over here on the side, but the nutrition is really what I'm doing the most of right now. So it's been a kind of interesting journey, and along the way people have pretty much handed me leadership situations, but then I have had to sort of step up to the bat and take on. For example, the company, the sales. You know, I just never thought of myself as a salesperson. I'll tell you, I was sitting in college. If somebody asked me if I was going to do sales, I would have said, mm-mm. But I learned so much from that, from that experience. So there are just many times along the way where people handed me these leadership chores, including today. I mean, this was another one. It was like, okay, here we go. So every time, you know, you think of it, is this the right place for me to be? Is there somebody else who would be better at this leadership job? And if not, or if you're the one, then you say, okay, fine, here we go. You know, this is what we're going to do. So, and the other thing that I think is interesting is that I feel sort of I'm still going along in my journey. I don't know what's next out there. And I don't know what the next situation where somebody says, Beth, you know, are you ready to do this? You know, what that's going to be. So that's it.
Very good. Thank you very much. I heard a lot in your comments, Beth, had to do with, and we've heard it from some of our other panelists, is when you're put into a situation, how are you adding value to those who you're interacting with? And I think that point of introspection, reflection, is often missed because the media shows a finished product. It doesn't show the thought process that occurs before whatever's finished is delivered to all of us. So again, great words of wisdom. As we discussed in the beginning, leadership it's an art and a science, like any great field of endeavor, right? So there are elements that can be measured, taught, developed over time. But then the way that people use these certain skills is unique to each individual, and that's the art part. So how do I parlay these skills into what it is I'm trying to accomplish? After doing all kinds of research and looking into the background on this, you know, Andy and the GLC have settled on these 5 competencies as being those that lead to great leadership. So we base a lot of our developmental work with the students around these 5 competencies. What our panelists have been kind enough to do, after they all arm wrestled for which one they could get, because most of them said, I want to talk about all of them, is they're each going to take one of these and just explain how it's played a role in their path. So let's go right in to talk about collaboration. Again, Flora, if you could lead us off, that would be great.
So when I was asked to speak about collaboration, which makes sense, I guess, now that I was talking about the team and the coach, that would be the one that I would speak to. I thought about, you know, the stories I could tell, and okay, I'm a lawyer. So this one time, you know, I was writing this international agreement. It was really exciting. I thought, wow, that's like snoozer. Particularly when I'm sitting here with like a cool DJ and this digital sports guy and #1 headliner here with the health industry. So I thought I would back up and go maybe with like the other part of my profession, the dual profession, the profession of arms. Okay, so I thought I would tell a story that my daughters love, and they're about the same age as a lot of you. They're 21 to 24. That would illustrate collaboration and then explain to you why and how, without collaboration and building that beforehand with folks through leadership, I could have failed and therefore have failed very many people. And so there I was. All right, isn't that where your story starts? There I was. I was 41 years old. I was a lawyer, as I mentioned before, to a 2-star command in Iraq during the ground offensive back in, in Iraq during 2002. He was in charge of 50,000 soldiers, and I got called into a briefing. And so I go into the briefing, and we all sit around a table. There's only a few of us. And I'm told at that point that we have been tasked to take a surrender from a terrorist organization that is currently in Iraq, that is in our sector, because we were fighting our way north at the time, right? And they wanted us to get them to surrender. They were a terrorist organization because they had held Americans hostage in the past, and they were in Iraq. They were not Iraqis, but they were there training the Republican Guard, which was the premier fighting force of Saddam Hussein. Okay, so there I was. my kids love that story because they just think it's cool that their mom, who makes raviolis for, for Christmas every year and, helps them dress, is in this situation. So what do? I go back to, I would say, my office, but it wasn't really an office. It's a truck that they kind of expand out, that you put picnic tables in and you put your computers on them and you have folding chairs. And I go back and I walk into my team. Okay, so I'm 41 years old. I've been in the Army for about 15 years. And I look at my team. We're spread out across the battlefield, so it's very small. My cell is very small. There are 2 captains, which are junior officers, all about in their mid-20s. Okay? They've not been out of law school for more than 3 years. I have my office administrator, who's probably about 30, who's not a lawyer but has been in the legal profession as a paralegal or as an office administrator. And I have my non-commissioned officer, who is also in her, at that point, probably her late 20s. And I tell them what our task is. And we have about 36 hours to accomplish this. So what does a lawyer do in that situation? I'm going to probably write the surrender agreement that we're going to propose. I'm going to look at what is going to be our negotiating technique with this organization. And all the time I'm thinking to myself, okay, part of that briefing was, if I get held hostage, what's going to be the extraction plan? And your mind begins to wander. And I say this because what that team did is they looked at me as their leader and they said, all right, what do we need done? And I said, okay. Someone needs to find agreements that we've done in the past. Probably Haiti would be as close as we could get. I need someone to go and find out from our intelligence folks what the leaders are like so we know what kind of negotiation plan we should come up with. And at that point, everybody in that team starts chipping in on what they think we should do. And everybody runs. And they just run. And they get that stuff. And they bring it back. I'm the best typist. I know that sounds odd, but probably because I've been typing the longest since I was the oldest. And I'm sitting at a computer, and the team and I are typing this as they're talking over my shoulder. I never looked at the law. I trusted them. I didn't go talk to the intel analysts. I had to trust them. And they were all going to help me get this done. And so when I went off, it was a collaborative effort. And had I not fostered that feeling in that truck that we worked out of before that moment, they could have looked at me and said, hey, sucks for you. But instead, it was like, we are going to get this done, and we're going to arm her as best we can as she goes forward and does this. You have to start early to build that team. They have to know you trust them and that you will rely upon them, and it is a collaborative environment where they can tell you how they feel and that you're going to trust them and the advice that they give you. During that time, my office administrator walked up, put her hand on my shoulder, said, ma'am, we need to go for a walk. And when we walked outside of the truck, she said, they can tell you're tense, and if you're tense, they're tense. Let's walk. If I hadn't established that relationship with my team, nobody would have told the emperor she had no clothing. And I would have gotten that done. So obviously it worked out. We all came home, right? Or I wouldn't be telling the story. But that's what collaboration is about. You can't wait till you need to collaborate with your team to suddenly say, let's roll up our sleeves and work together. If they don't feel part of the team, they won't do it for you when you need them. So that's the story. Good one.
You hit the word trust several times in there, and I think your last comment is pretty pointed. Trust doesn't occur in the moment that you need it, right? Trust occurs along the way. And of course, there are skills and behaviors that develop that. Nick, let's move to vision and strategy. Tell us about that, would you?
Sure. Of course, first of all these things are super important. I mean, collaboration is huge. The ability to not micromanage your team and trust them is big. The other thing I'm reminded of, I tell people all the time in my job that we're not saving lives. I mean, it's completely amplified here. You know, I've had to negotiate with my parents to not be grounded and occasionally to get back in the bedroom with my wife, but that's about as extreme as it gets. There's no lawyers or documentation for that. You know, the fun thing about my job is I was over at Fiji a little bit before and was telling the students there is it's changing every single day, and I'll tell a little story about sort of that amplifies that. And so my job is anticipating how it's going to change, and anticipate, again, like I'm in the money-making business, how we're going to create budgets, sell things in, make sure we deliver satisfied advertisers, and that's really tricky to do. And in TV's been doing things the same way for 60 years. It's a very established business. Digital media is not. And so the role itself is challenging because you have to sort of be a fortune teller, but you also have to be good at business and figure this out. And so the goal is figuring out where we think things are going and then building strategies and tactics that allow us to deliver our business objectives, which are satisfied advertisers, happy customers, and hitting our revenue targets for the company. The really cool part of my job is for the next year, there are things that are going to happen that I don't even know, that we don't know about yet. Like Snapchat's this huge phenomenon in digital media. I'm sure most of the kids here are on it. It didn't exist really 2 years ago. Google's 10 years old. Facebook's like 7 or 8 years old. Twitter's 4 years old. They're going to IPO for $70 million, or 70 million shares at $20 in about a week and a half. And so we have to figure out, how to adapt to all this stuff that's happening and start figuring out how consumer behavior is going to change over the next 12 months. And so the real example that sticks with me is in Vancouver in the Olympics, there were no tablets, like they didn't exist. And so that is a pretty startling statement. I mean, we're going to Sochi in 5 months, and that will be sort of the 4-year anniversary of the Vancouver Olympics. There was 0% tablet penetration. Consumers didn't have them in their hot little hands yet. By London, over 50% of our mobile content was consumed on tablets. By Sochi, who knows? There's a different time difference. We're streaming every event live. And so I got to figure out what I'm going to tell advertisers in terms of how they're spending their money, where it's going to run, what it's going to look like. And by the way, my revenue target is going up 100% from Sochi, and the good news is we're going to hit it. So how do we deal with that? You know, so the vision is, okay, how do we read the tea leaves and figure out where this consumption is going? How is the consumer adapting? How many more tablets are in the marketplace? How many more will be out there? What does bandwidth look like for streaming content? What does the time difference look like from London, which was an almost live Olympics during the day, to Sochi, which is a little bit different? By the end of the at-work day on the East Coast, the Olympics will be over, which means people won't be streaming content. So building a plan, building the construct around that so that we can build a business plan that allows us to, again, deliver revenue to the company, because, again, that's our bottom line. So my job, in many cases, is to really spend a lot of time rolling up my sleeves and try to figure out how this consumer adoption and technology advancement will affect our business. For 2014, just in the budget setting exercise, we know the world is going to look different, and our budgets grow at a very accelerated pace. So TV grows sort of in this mid-single digit percentages. We're going to grow 35-40%. That's awesome, I guess, if you're into big numbers. The problem is we don't know how we're going to get there yet because the budgets haven't been spent. That's material growth. So game planning, how are we going to go find that money? Where's it going to come from? What does it look like? How do we assign our team to go find this business that isn't out there yet? Is a pretty core thing to how we do it. And so again, it bleeds into other areas. You have to trust your team to come up with their game plans. You have to stress test them to make sure that the logic is sound. You have to give them the tools and the resource that they need to go out and deliver against that. And then most importantly, we have to be highly iterative because these things change very, very dramatically. A year ago, we didn't have a Twitter strategy. 6 months ago, we didn't have a Twitter strategy. When we launched the Premier League in fourth quarter, we had a Twitter strategy. We figured out how to make money off of it. And so, again, making sure that we have some visibility into where we think things are going, and then making sure that we're able to iterate rapidly to deliver against that course. You know, for me, it's like a combination of art and science. It's gut, what am I doing as a consumer? What is this room doing as consumers? And then using sort of our analytical tools and our research tools to provide the science to help us really turn that gut into a real sort of empirical vision. And then it's really critical for us to make sure we're building the right things and stacking them on top of, off of this growth. You know, everybody in my business is tasked with, you know, aggressive revenue growth and things like that. What makes our job fun is that we've really got to use our brains and sort of the art part, which is one of the great things about Gettysburg, is it gives you this flexibility to move rapidly and sort of think on the balls of your feet. But at the end of the day, it starts with where's this whole thing going, and then what is the game plan, and what are sort of the backup game plans to help us get there. You know, and predicting the future obviously isn't easy. We'd all be rich and famous if we could do that. And I can't do that, and I'm neither rich nor famous. You know, but my job at the company is to provide a real solid vision for where I think things are going, and making sure that the team is executing and nimble enough to adapt as we go, so that we can deliver advertiser satisfaction as well as deliver the number for the company.
Thank you. I don't at all envy your position. And the speed with which the industry is changing, you have to imagine, though, that someone still has to have a vision. Right? Everything doesn't happen day to day without knowing where are we going and how to articulate that. So that's got to be a great challenge. As we move to the next competency, for you math majors, you probably gathered that we have 5 competencies and 4 panelists. Well, Andy Hughes, exercising great influence, said, well, Neil, say something about influence. So I'm not going to do that because I want the time to be with the panelists, but I will leave you with this thought on what influence is. About a year ago, my company came to me, and I work for, it's about a 7,000 person organization that deals globally in medical diagnostic imaging. That's the business that we're in. 22 languages, 140 countries around the globe. He said, Neil, we want you to change the customer experience. Okay. Yeah, I'll work on that. What are we going to do on Tuesday, sort of thing. And by the way, we want you to start with an organization of just you. So I would put back to all of you who are sitting and listening to this now, imagine yourself in that position, where you're being removed from a line organization that you've managed for years, where we want you to change the experience around the globe that customers have with our company. How would you begin? What would you do? Right? That doesn't change with an email. It doesn't change with a mandate. So the skills that are necessary, and I certainly will not claim success in having done that, but it's a real life situation, and one that I would imagine all 4 of you have faced as well, and many of you in the room. That influence is that ability to bring others along, and in many cases to let them take you where you know you need to go that you can't get otherwise. It is the collaboration, it is the trust, etc. But the workplace today, and those of you graying at a temple out there know that organizations are becoming flatter, they're becoming more horizontal, and more work is being done in groups. And the hierarchy is really diminished. So now it's the ability to gather people around common interests and work together. So it's a real skill and one that we focus on in great detail here on campus. Dion, why don't you take us into engaging differences?
Certainly. I spoke about it a little bit earlier as far as looking into a group of people and distinguishing where they come from, if we have any commonalities. My job for the past 20 years, it's fun. It's a job, but it's also very fun. I DJed at clubs all over the world for different people, from Estonia to the Philippines, Colombia. And part of the job of a DJ is, you know, they pay you to make people dance. It's not as easy as just pressing play and people just start dancing. A lot of thought goes into it. Something we call reading the crowd, where you look into your crowd and there's different pockets of people, different backgrounds and different interests in music. The way they dress tells me something about what they listen to, what they might be drinking, how they move to the music, how they might react physically to a song I might play, or an expression on their face. And as a DJ, you're always looking at that in the crowd. I'm always like surfing the crowd and seeing, well, who's having fun, who isn't having fun, how do they react to the song I played, and how can I do better the next time around? I'll give you an example. A few months ago, I was spinning at a hip-hop club, and there was a Latin couple there, and we don't really play Latin music at the club I was at, but it was early in the night. So they were there, they seemed to be married, so I ended up playing some salsa merengue for them, and they started dancing and having a good time. When they were about to leave, a few hours later, the lady came up to me and said, "Thank you so much, the music was great, it was perfect." To me, that's an example of, looking in and identifying, what people are into, and then sharing that common experience with them. And then from there, you've gained their trust. Without saying it, a DJ is asking people who pay money to come into a club to trust their ability to let them and make them have fun. And I think, like I said, I learned that as a kid. Is I'm always looking around the room and seeing. I'm very observant, and I retain a lot of the information I see at my job, or if I'm with one of my groups. I also manage a track athlete. She's my second cousin. She's an Olympic hurdler for Trinidad and Tobago, and she was in Beijing and got hurt but didn't go to London, but she's training for the next one, and she just wants to run. She wants to run. It's like a wild horse. She just wants to run, and sometimes I have to pull her back and let her know that we have a goal for you off track, and we have things we want you to do off track, and appearances and endorsements. And it's not just about being the fastest or running. You have to have a plan. And let's look at your career and the hurdles we might come to. As a hurdle you might run or jump over while you're racing, and let's tackle it one by one. And it's been an experience because she's 26, and just literally just wants to run, and she's very fit, and that's all she does is run. But being able to create a plan for her and identify what her needs are has been a challenge, because one, she's family, so there's that kind of gray area where you want to be stern with her as a manager, but she's a younger cousin. So I found that being able to identify what her needs are and coming up with a plan for her career has been key, and my experience with DJing music and managing artists helped me, because she's a new venture for me. So it's almost like she's like the guinea pig of something that's new and not famous and not discovered, but has a lot of raw talent.
Terrific. Thanks, Dion. Dion, listening to both your comments too, it's not hard to see why you've been able to accomplish what you do. You seem to have this ability to see things through other people's eyes.
Absolutely.
And interpret their needs, and that's a gift. Thank you for sharing it with us. Beth, tell us about self-awareness. That's not that important, is it?
I would say yes. It's probably one of the easiest ones for me to talk about. I think it helps you value the accomplishments of those around you and listen to the way other people's ideas, help to have them be included in the decisions that you're making, and to find common ground. We've talked about common ground between people here. I think as a leader, it's always important to be humble and to pick up the pieces behind the people that you're working with. So you have them go, and you are the stopgap. So you're holding the fort down in the background. And I think the other thing that's important about leadership is that no job is too menial. I think that, you think of leaders as somebody way out in front, and maybe, I don't know, maybe some of the times that's the case, but most of the time they're in the trenches, kind of making sure that everything's happening and moving forward. I know a lot of the parents here hold those kind of positions in the community and at work, and understand exactly what that's all about. The other thing, as I was thinking about this, putting these notes down, make sure someone proofreads your work. I mean, basically that's, that self-awareness of, I can make mistakes, and somebody else has got to look at my work besides me. I may be proud of this, I may think I'm totally right, but there's always, somebody else's opinion is invaluable in what you're doing. And also with self-awareness, the concept of the ultimate common good is really what you're working toward, not your personal, it's not about me, it's about what we're getting done here. It's about moving the idea rather than promoting the person. So when you want to make sure that idea is the most important thing. You also you serve the people you work with. okay, or that you are, any great leader is a great service person. I mean, you think about the great leaders in history. Those people, they were there for service. So, and that comes out of, actually, one of the, I love schools, like, do great work. I love that. Virginia Tech has to do with service. I graduated from Virginia Tech. I think I mentioned that, but theirs has to do with service. Those mottos, I think, have a lot of value in them, just, again, from a leadership standpoint. Occasionally, you may turn down a leadership position because there's someone there better to lead the group for a particular environment. For example, this is a little idea of this, but again, you know, in thinking back over my life, there have been many times when people have asked me to do things. Well, one of them was to be the head of a particular board. And I knew that the people that I was going to be working against, and you'll have to excuse me on this, but it was a whole group of men, okay? And I had worked with this group before, and I felt as though the idea would be better served, and it's hard to say this as a woman, but by a man. So it was a situation where I just felt like that would be a better leadership person. So those are times when, even in that role, you're sort of playing a leadership role and getting the idea through. It's really the idea that needs to go through. So I guess that's
Great,
it.
great. Thanks very much. We struggle to try and pictorially represent these competencies and how they relate to one another, and very quickly I showed that one slide. But our belief here, and I think I've heard it in some of the comments from our panelists, is self-awareness really is the bridge across all the other competencies, right? How can I expect someone to want to be part of my followership if I myself don't know who I am and where I'm going? So this whole, we talked about it earlier, several of our panelists, about authenticity and being genuine, following personal passion. If you don't have a clear feeling of what that is, why would someone want to go there with you? So it really becomes kind of the cornerstone of a lot of the work that we do with the young men and women on campus.